fall. So I do believe I just saw my last guest come in to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center, and I'm glad he was able to take some time to come in today. Former U.S. Attorney Peter Neronha, I believe, is around the corner.
Hi, Kate.
Thanks for coming in today. I appreciate it.
Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. And I'm glad that you came in. Obviously, difficult world circumstances right now, and wanted to just talk with you domestically about efforts, anti-terrorism efforts.
Right.
Now, of course, being from the U.S. Attorney's Office on the prosecutorial side of things, but you know, we saw it here in Rhode Island. We saw it in Warwick. I mean, where do the efforts stand today in your estimation? And again, you know, what was your reaction when you heard about what happened in England?
Well, first of all, a lot of sympathy for the victims of that horrible tragedy yesterday. You know, unfortunately this has been replicating itself around the world. And it's just heartbreaking. There's no other real way to say it. And of course you have to condemn the people who were behind it. I think when you focus on what we're doing and should be doing here in Rhode Island is to continue to do what we've been doing. When I was U.S. Attorney, the FBI was very engaged in following up every lead that anyone would ever bring in about a potential issue. And you know, a lot of those leads turn out to be nothing. I think former FBI Director Jim Comey put it really, really well when he said, we're not looking for a needle in a haystack, we're looking for which pieces of hay will turn into needles. And if you really think about that, and that's the classic Comey way of turning a phrase, but if you really think about that, that's how hard this is, you know, is looking out into the world that's there, looking out into Rhode Island, and seeing, you know, which one of those pieces of hay, meaning those people that show some sort of some behavior that suggests they might be a threat, figuring out whether they're real threats or whether they're not. And I know the case that you're referring to down in Warwick, and I have to say that on the facts there, when you first looked at them, did not look that much different from a lot of other cases. That's the one that turned out to be something in the end. But you've got to run them all to ground, because you never know which one of those pieces of hay will turn into the needle.
And do you have, you know, are we equipped with the necessary resources? I mean, manpower, money power. You know, did you find that when you were in the office?
Yeah, I definitely did. You know, the FBI does a great job with that. The state police do a great job. Local police departments do a great job. The Joint Terrorism Task Force, which is led by the FBI here with a lot of other partners, state police, local police, does a really good job of running all those issues to ground. There are FBI agents here that do nothing other than that. And so, you know, when we were doing all these other cases, corruption cases, white collar cases, violent crime cases, there was another group of agents which was just working on this full time. And there's an assistant U.S. attorney who's very, very capable, who works with those FBI agents to run all these things to ground. And so if there's, you know, if we ever needed or did need electronic surveillance, well, then they're ready to do that. A lot of assistance from Washington, as you might expect. Yeah, so from a resource perspective, we've got it covered, but where the public can really help is by whenever they see something that looks, you know, we say it all the time, see something, say something. You can never stop reinforcing that that principle, because it's the public that will notice something that may be amiss, report it to law enforcement, and let law enforcement sort it out.
And, you know, talking maybe a little bit about that, you know, as you said, pointing something out, calling, I mean, who do they call? Just local authorities?
Well, you know, certainly when there's anything that is very concerning in the immediate, right away, you always want to call your local police, call 911, because they're the first responders. You know, if you sort of tier it out, it's state police and local police are always going to respond first. The FBI will also respond too, but first responders are definitely the local police department, call 911. And then they will access it. If the local police department or the state police sees something that, you know, has some potential national security connections, they'll forward it to the Fusion Center and or the JTTF, the Joint Terrorism Task Force, and then they'll run that to ground. I will say that, so that's that piece of it. A lot of it is, though, it takes a little more time than that. So a lead will come in, well, this person, you know, was in the store buying this, or this person just was at a particular place talking about that. And the speech alone, obviously, is not something which is people should be prevented from doing. But the question is, given the nature of the speech, what the person's talking about, are there threats against others? It requires some follow-up, and that follow-up often takes weeks, months, sometimes even longer than that, to rule a threat in or rule a threat out. I will say that, I guess, what I come back to when I think about those investigations when I was U.S. attorney is how long-term they were. So we would get briefed and have a formal briefing quarterly. And a lot of the same potential issues or potential threats were being worked on for a very, very long period of time until you were really confident that you could rule out someone or some group of people as a threat.
And let's talk a little bit about what happened in Manchester. Again, the sort of new world order of it happening just outside of where security actually was. I mean, are we going to see sort of new security measures? How does law enforcement even begin to address a situation like this?
Well, this is for a long time, right? This has been the problem, and I think part of the world that we live in today is we just have to accept a certain amount of risk in our lives and go forward, notwithstanding it. We talk a lot about airport security, and there's lots of security from the gate, from where you go through TSA to the gate. Yeah. There's not a lot of security from TSA back to the curb. And those of us in law enforcement talk about how do you secure that space. Well, if you go down to green, you'll see more law enforcement on the scene there. But there are vulnerabilities really anywhere. I mean, a lot of the threats that have been thwarted have been. I think of the one in New York, where there was a vehicle where an explosive device had been placed. A citizen just noticed that and reported it to police, if I remember correctly. The same thing was true in Portland, Oregon, around Christmas time a number of years ago, where a Muslim American. And that's a point to be made. That many Muslim Americans are part of this fight too. We don't want to lose that in this discussion. They were the ones who identified that explosive device. So it's really a matter of we can't wrap ourselves, in bubble wrap and expect nothing to happen. We just have to be vigilant about what's going on around us. When we see something that doesn't make sense, we need to it's a challenge.
And let's talk a little bit maybe about immigration role of folks coming in and out of the country that might have gotten training someplace else. Where is that right now, and what needs to be done?
Well, I think when you're going to be talking about screening, and obviously that's been a hot topic with the president's executive order, both the first one and the second one now are being held in abeyance while the courts sort of sort out what's practical and what's reasonable and what's constitutional. I'm a big believer in looking at individuals as individuals. I don't think that we should paint with a broad brush and exclude a group of people because they happen to speak a certain language or practice a certain faith. I think that's a huge mistake, and it's not only is it a mistake practically, it's not constitutional in my view. So the key is that before people come into the country, or when people come back to the country, that we screen them appropriately. That's harder in some places than others, given the circumstances on the ground, depending on where they're coming from. And so, like anything in law enforcement, you have to focus on the specific threat you're dealing with and deal with the specific circumstances that you're dealing with. So what may work with respect to one place where people are coming from may not work with respect to another one, but you've got to be thoughtful about it. You've got to focus on the individual circumstances and really try to make a smart judgment about what it is you're doing. I think when we try to paint with a broad brush, it's counterproductive. And that's what concerns me and concerned me about some of the president's initial steps in this area.
And let's talk a little bit about the DOJ and sort of the prosecution role. Will we see more an enhanced prosecution if things come before the DOJ, and whether it's Rhode Island or across the country? There's of course enhanced vigilance, but what's the DOJ's role specifically?
Well, certainly if there were a national security incident, then the department would prosecute it. I think the department had great success under the Obama administration in those cases. I can think of my friend Barbara McQuaid, who was the U.S. Attorney in Detroit, who on her very first day on the job had the Christmas Day bomber coming in, into Detroit airspace. But I remember the response being really terrific from the U.S. Attorney's Office out there and the FBI, and that replicated itself on cases around the country. I think the one thing that Americans can take comfort from is that the Justice Department, the career people in the Justice Department and the career FBI agents know what they're doing and will do a really, really good job in this space. The key, though, is to make sure that we get information out there to them where we see it. They're going to work their own sources. They're going to develop cases where they can and as they should. But the public has a role here too, and we shouldn't underestimate our own ability to impact threat prevention.
And you've continued to have a fairly public role since leaving the U.S. Attorney's Office. And we had you in here just a few weeks ago you were speaking with Josh Fenton. tell folks what you've been up to and what maybe you're looking to do, because I'll continue to put you on the spot.
I knew that was coming.
Of course.
You know, I've continued to be out there in schools a lot. You know, I'm really am convinced that, and I've said this both publicly and privately, that after national security, one of the biggest public safety threats that we've faced on Rhode Island in the last couple of years has been this opioid crisis. And you know, my ability to impact prosecutions is now gone. I'm not there anymore. But my ability to raise awareness and reach children, kids, high school kids, I think is still there. And so I've been really busy with that. I'm going to be in the Warwick schools this week. I was in Cumberland last week. I was in Providence the week before. I've really been engaged in trying to raise a level of awareness around that really difficult problem. In terms of what I'm going to do next, I'm still sorting that out, you know, so I'm not going to give you the answer you're probably looking for.
Next time.
Maybe next time.
Next time.
But, you know, I continue to kind of sit with my wife and my kids and talk to a lot of people about what I'm going to do next. And I'm not ready to make any decisions about that, except to say that, you know, I've been in public service now for almost 2 decades, maybe even a little bit more. And I always loved it. I always felt like I was doing something which had meaning for me, and to the extent that I can, I'd like to remain in public service.
Well, I appreciate your coming in today to get your perspective, again, from the U.S.
Sure.
Attorney's Office, again, talking about what happened over in England, kind of what the state of things are here, and hopefully we'll have you back in soon to talk more.
Sounds good, Kate.
Okay.
Great to see you.
Peter, thanks for coming in.
Bye now.
Former U.S. Attorney Peter Neronha coming in today. We asked him to come in on the state of sort of anti-terrorism efforts in light of the horrific events that took place in Manchester, England. You know, from his perspective, having been in office, talking about where he thinks things stand on a number of issues. You know, both FBI, U.S. Attorney's Office, all the way through immigration issues under the Trump administration. It was good to get his perspective, again, as we are trying to make sense of senseless acts. And as we said, our hearts and condolences go out to folks over there that